What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next, we are going to be talking about the top sales from this last week. But we're also going to go into a little bit more focused look at the CBCS sales as well, because I am clearly a glutton for punishment after the last CBCS sales video I did, where I was constantly attacked and called a shill and a coward. So that was fun. So I thought I would do it again. So let's check these out. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So what we are talking about here is the weekly Heritage comic auction. I like to watch this auction every week. There's always a big range of books, some cool books that come up for sale. And for me, this is one of the ways that I really gauge how books are performing week after week. Now, the interesting thing that I saw this week was that there were actually a fair number of CBCS books that were part of this auction. So in addition to talking about some of the big sales that happened this week, how they performed, I also want to focus on those CBCS sales. And this is not because I am trying to attack CBCS or anything like that. I had some comments in the last CBCS video, so I'm going to address some of that here as well for comparison with CGC and how CGC performed. But also, I think this concept that if you just don't talk about it, it's going to go away is completely flawed. I think maybe we need to talk about this a little bit more about that price discrepancy, and maybe that would get more people to actually actively bid on them. And then I could actually have positive videos to make about CBCS instead of what this one is going to be. Because yes, it was another disappointing week for CBCS books, but we'll get into that a little bit more later in the video. And that's when I'm sure I'll get all the shill and coward comments and all those kinds of things. So it'll be fun. All right, so let's check out this auction. So this is the weekly Heritage comic auction. You can see that this week, this number right here on the right, they sold $640,000 in comics just in this weekly auction. So a pretty decent sized auction. The lower end I tend to see is around 500,000. The higher end is around 700,000. So 640, pretty good sized auction in this one. So we're going to talk about a wide variety of books. Like I said, we're going to talk about all different eras, but the number one book, this is one of the things I like to look at this page with the Heritage auction. This is the recap of the auction. I like to order it from biggest sale to smallest sale. That's where I can often find some of those books that just surprise me or have some really big, strong sales. Actually have a few CBCS books up here. And so they had big sales numbers, but not necessarily strong sales numbers. But again, we'll get into that later. Now, the first book that we're going to talk about here is this Mass Comics #1. This was the biggest sale for the week, sold for $15,600 for a restored copy. And if we look at the restoration notes, it says that it's a slight C1, which is amateur, and it says a small amount. So it says it includes a small amount of cover touch on color, small amount of glue on cover. Now, the thing to know is with CGC is that small amount can be a pretty big range. And so I imagine, actually the person that bought it commented on my Instagram page, or I'm assuming it's the person that bought it. They said that they were going to be receiving this book. And so I'm guessing that they're maybe going to be trying to have that restoration removed. Now, before this one went for sale, I went and checked the grader's notes for it, because that's one of the nice things. Heritage has that quick link to the grader's notes. And you can see it says small amount of color touch on full right and full left front cover. So even though it says small amount, there is a fair amount on here, or a lot of like little amounts on here. And so if we zoom in on this book a little bit, we can see some of it. And to me, I don't think that this should have classified as a small amount. I think it's a little more than that, but that's me. But you can see it. You can see it here. You can see it, all this here by this staple. It's pretty obvious to see where it was filled in. This right here. You can see where it's filled in along these like creases here. And then if you go over to the right side, you find the same thing. It's generally all in the black. And so while, yes, because of the type of restoration that's on here, you could get this back to a blue label, it is going to have what appears to be a pretty big impact on the appearance of the book. So just something to think about, always consider that if that's your plan. Now, for how this book performed, my estimate for this book, even with that restoration and everything, my estimate for this book was $13,500, sold for $15,600. So beat my estimate by 16%. So it was a pretty solid sale for this book. But regardless, this is a very expensive book, restored or not, and especially when you can get the book back to a blue label. All right, so that was the first book. Let's talk about the second book. Second book was actually a CBCS book. This was a showcase number 4, first appearance of the Flash, or Barry Allen as the Flash, a CBCS 3.0, pretty reasonable looking copy. I don't know if the person's plan is to try to cross grade it or not. I mean, it would probably keep a 3.0. Depends on what what the staple situation is like. It looks like it's got a spine roll. You can see a little bit, weirdness going on up there, so that could probably be addressed. But it has a fair amount of wear. 3.0 looks about right to me. This one went for $15,000, and this was actually a pretty reasonable sale. I actually had this book priced at $15,000. So if that was a CGC, like a CGC 3.0, and now the high was 23,750, so definitely down from the peak that this book was hitting during the comic boom, that kind of thing. But this was actually a pretty reasonable sale, sold for exactly what I thought a CGC Showcase 4 and a 3.0 would sell for. So not all doom and gloom. Not all doom and gloom with these. Actually, the Silver Age CBCS books did relatively well. That's where I saw some relatively decent sales with CBCS. All right, now let's check the next one here, because this was also CBCS. Now, this was Amazing Fantasy 15 in a 1.8, sold for $14,400. This one I had estimated, if this was a CGC 1.8, I had estimated at $16,500, had peaked at $33,222 during the comic boom. So this one did disappoint some compared to what I thought a CGC book would sell for. Went 13% below my estimate. I'm not convinced this book would get a 1.8 if it was at CGC. That's one area where I have said that I see some definite differentiation on grading between CGC and CBCS, and it's on the very low end. And so I think this would probably be a 1.5 CGC. I mean, you've got the cover and the centerfold detached. Now, with the cover detached, the max you can get is a 4, so that kind of puts you that top tier what you can get with it. But also the centerfold detached. Also, just a lot of wear to this book, and the piece missing out of the front. Colors are good. I mean, that's a positive for it. But I think probably if you try to cross grade this, you'd probably get a 1.5. Maybe that played some role into the bidding, but that is not my job here to grade that book. They graded that book. They said it was a 1.8. And so at a 1.8, I say 16,500 if it was CGC, and it went for 13% below my estimate. Now, that's not too bad. That's not too far off, but was a little bit of a disappointment there for that book. All right, now let's talk about some pretty big Silver Age books that were in this auction. I mean, we already had the Amazing Fantasy 15, but there were some other pretty big Silver Age books that were in this auction. You can see them all listed here. First one, Journey into Mystery, number 83, in a 5.5, a white pages copy, a nice presenting copy of this book, sold for $13,200 and we'll say $10. I had this one going for $13,000. Went for 2% above my estimate. I mean, basically went for exactly what I thought it would. Now, if this had not been white pages, I would have had it going a little bit lower. I gave it a premium for that white pages. I know that does give books a bit of a bump. And so this one went exactly what I thought it would. Definitely a book that has corrected as well. This book peaked at $23,580. So down about $10,000 from that peak sale. Not quite 50%, maybe it's like 45%, something like that. But still down quite a bit from the peak, but sold for what I thought it would. All right, now the next big Silver Age key that went up for sale was this X-Men number 1. This was a 5.0. This one has that little bit lighter green corner box there, not the dark green that I generally prefer. 5.0 went for $13,200. This was actually a pretty strong sale. I had this going for $12,000, beat my estimate by 10%. Peak sale was $30,100. So definitely over 50% drop from those peak sales. But I mean, just shows that not a lot of these books are are really getting down to where it seems like they're starting to level off. If you watched Mickey's video recently, Swagglehouse Comics, where he did his comic index, he was showing a lot of leveling off in those Silver Age and Bronze Age prices when you look at the overall market for the books. And that is a lot of what I'm seeing here. Now, this week, definitely, I would say in the Silver Age, there were some big drops, but not drops that went really far below where they should be. It just seems like we're getting some of these people are just kind of like letting the books correct. And that's what I'd like to see. I'm tired of these kind of like slow bleeds down in the price and just letting the book correct and buying it where we feel like it kind of should be based on 2020 prices. And that's kind of around where a lot of these seem to be. Now, this could also be pumped up because of X-Men 97. People are excited about that show, but this was a strong sale. All right. Now let's talk about one more Silver Age key. And this was maybe we'll do two more. This is Tales of Suspense number 39, first appearance of Iron Man. This one has dropped significantly from its peak as well. Peak price for 4.0 was 16,800. I had this going for 8,000, so went 3% below my estimate. Again, pretty much as close as you can hope to get when you're pricing out a multi-$1,000 book, especially because it's missing this little piece up in the corner here. It is a solid presenting copy otherwise, but that can be a big deterrent for some people. But yeah, 3% below my estimate. Solid sale for the first appearance of Iron Man. Now, the last big Silver Age key I wanted to talk about was one that definitely went low. This is Incredible Hulk number 1, 3.0, off-white to white pages. Pretty good looking copy. I mean, there's this tape pull up here, but otherwise a pretty solid looking copy. Went for $10,800. I had this going for $13,500. Peak sale was $30,000. This was 20% below my estimate. This one took a big correction down in this week. I don't know if that'll hold, if it'll stay down like that, but this was definitely a low sale for this book. I don't remember if this is the low sale for the year. Let's check it out. Look at Incredible Hulk number 1, or not low sale for the year, but low sale for the last few years. Let's check it out. Incredible Hulk number 1 in a 3.0, $10,800. So we go down to the 3.0, and you can see like this is a pretty big gap down there. So this is the lowest sale since 2020. And that's what we've been talking about. You know, you kind of look at what those 2020 prices were. But this book, I mean, 2019 had high sales of 12,300, 11,400, 11,000 in 2017. So this feels like a very, very low risk buy. This is maybe even below where I would think it should be, but pretty close. Like if I wasn't expecting that big of a drop right now, but where I feel like this book should be, feels about right. I feel like this was a very low risk pickup and a solid looking copy. I mean, dark colors, like just good looking book. All right. Now I want to talk about a couple Bronze Age books, and then we're going to get into the CBCS books. The first one is just because I talked about this one in the comic link recap that I did, that there was a 9.0 Hulk 181 that went for $6,000. And I thought it might be because it looked like there was some damage in those corners, maybe in the case. And that seems like that might have been true. I mean, I had this one estimated at 7,000, went for 7,200. And so this was a big jump back up. And it just shows that, and I talk about this a lot, like depending on which platform you're on, who's watching any given week. And that's why I look at a lot of books to determine how the market's performing. You can't really look at just one book because just a week ago, a 9.0 sold for $6,000. And then like about a week later, you have a 9.0 sell for 7,200, 20% more. And this actually around what I thought it should go for. Like I said, I thought it would go for 7,000, went for 7,200. The other one, this book just keeps shocking me. X-Men number 101. First appearance of the Phoenix, a 9.8 white pages, sold for $8,100. I had this book going for $5,500. Peak sale during the comic boom was $9,600. There was a really high sale during the big Heritage comic auction for $8,400, I believe. That was a CVA sticker. And I also feel like I may have had something to do with that because I made that video where I was like, is this book maybe a 9.9? And maybe that caused a little bit of extra bidding on it. But this is definitely not a 9.9. You know, when you zoom in on the flaws on this book, you can definitely see, let's see, there was like spine, it looks like probably a spine tick there. It's hard with the white, but you go down to this corner, kind of a roughed up corner down there. I mean, it's a 9.8. It's a good looking book, but to me, this doesn't look like a 9.9 type contender. A little bit of a rounded corner over here as well. It's not a 9.9 contender, but went for a huge number. I mean, 47% over my estimate. This book, the range that you get in pricing for this book is wild. And some of it might have to do with white pages, but white pages copies aren't super rare of this one. And so that's why I don't feel like that should really drive like these like 50% jumps in price. I mean, look at this. Look at this huge swing you have along here, just up and down with this book. I feel like like maybe you try to be one of the lucky ones and buy around 4,500 and hope you can flip it for 7,000 or something. I mean, it's just wild swings in this book. But yeah, I mean, that's what it did. It was a big sale for X-Men 101 and a 9.8. Now, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about here when it comes to the CBCS sales. So now we're getting to CBCS sales, and I'll talk about what I went through with this process, because what I looked at was I noticed that there were quite a few CBCS books in the golden age in this auction that were actually what I would consider key books. Now, there were a lot of CBCS books in this auction, about 40, and even more than that because there were some lots, but a lot of them I would call kind of like junk slabs. They're like $50 or $100 type slabs. And so I don't really price those out. That's not what I look at when I'm looking at these auctions. I'm looking at what I consider keys. And so a lot of those books were kind of like junk slabs, but in the golden age, there were 9 books that had sold that I would consider keys or nicer books. And then what I did was I priced all those out. I got how they performed. And then I looked at the CGC books and I priced out all the CGC books and how they performed. And I'll give you the TLDR, like right off the bat here. And the average performance of the golden age books, when I priced them all out, the percentage that they performed above or below my estimates, when I averaged all the CGC ones out, beat my estimates by 2%. So that's kind of just to show, like I talked about, like I've been pricing books like thousands and thousands and thousands of books for a number of years now. I feel like I'm pretty good at pricing out books, what they should sell for. And now you're going to have ones that go above, you're going to have ones that go below, but it's all about like, what do you get that average to be? And so it was on average, it was 2% over my estimate. The CBCS books, the average, 27% below my estimate. And that's even worse performing than the last CBCS video I did, which was, I believe, 21% below my estimates. So that's what I'm talking about here, is that's what we see. It's like 10, 15, 20, 30% typically below the estimates when you're selling a CBCS book. Now, what I've noticed is it seems like the big difference is that with CGC, I'll have a lot of books that, sell around my estimate. I'll have some that underperform and I'll have some that overperform. With CBCS, I have a few books that'll sell around my estimate, and then I have the rest underperform. Almost nothing overperforms. That's the thing. There was only one book in this entire auction that really overperformed as a CBCS, and it was a special Marvel edition 15 9.2 that sold for like 500 when I had it estimated at 425. Other than that, pretty substantial underperformance. Now, just to kind of like go through some of these, I'll give you some examples. Talk about the first book here. And I know who picked this one up. I know he's very happy with picking this one up. And this is a case where, like this is the type of thing you might want to look for, where you can maybe get a deal out of like a major golden age book. And so for this one, this is All Select Comics #1, one of the best Alex Schomburg covers, especially for World War II, that was ever done. And so this is a 1.8 CBCS, sold for $5,520. I had this, if this was a CGC, going for $7,000. So went 21% below my estimate. Now, I did talk to him about this as well. And this is another case where I think CBCS grades a little differently on these lower end ones. And so it says front cover reattached to back cover with moderate amount of archival tape on interior cover, moderate amount of archival tape on interior cover, and first 2 wraps. This makes it seem like this is a it has to be a split spine and detached without the tape. And so I would say that book, the max you're going to get from CGC with that is a 1.5. And so I told him if he plans to cross grade this book, you should probably expect to get a 1.5, but still a good buy, even if this was a 1.5 of this book. But if this was a 1.8, which is what it was graded as, I had this valued at $7,000, 21% below my estimate. Now, the next one, this is a super rare book, not easy to price either. This is Amazing Man Comics number 5, but technically number 1. And this is a married cover as well. This one went for $2,160. I had it going for $2,400 if it was a CGC. So it went 10% below my estimate. Not too bad. I mean, for what this is, I mean, this is a Centaur. I've talked about Centaur before. I mean, they're super rare. There's a small subset of people that really like to collect them and pay a lot for them. But yeah, I mean, went for pretty close. I mean, within 10%, not a big underperformer, but still an underperformer. Now, the next one, we had a Detective Comics number 67. And this is the first cover appearance of the Penguin. So as I'm saying, like a lot of these, they're pretty big books. And this was a off-white pages, 1.5, went for 1,560. I had this going for 1,900, was 18% below my estimate. And so this is the thing. This is what you'll see as kind of the general trend is whether they're, a little more or less below, they're almost all below my estimates. And I feel like that's just what's missing with the CBCS books is that you don't have that, really have that possibility of that bidding war. With the CGC books, you're going to get those bidding wars every once in a while, and you get these big sales, these big overperformers, and we're just don't see that with CBCS. So if you are a CBCS fan, instead of attacking me on this video, maybe, go out and watch these auctions, and when you see those books, go and bid on them and actually see if we get some reasonable, higher sales for these books. Now, this next one, this was the second worst performer. This one was pretty shocking. I should have bought this book. I wasn't paying attention, and I 100% would have bought this book. I talk about this one a lot, and I mean, regardless of how I feel about the cover being super, disturbing, this is Lawbreaker Suspense Stories number 11. You should have seen this because I talked about it, but if you haven't, you're new to the channel. You've got this creepy guy in the cover, basically telling this woman that she couldn't call for help even if she wanted to because he cut out the tongues of everybody down in the basement. And he's got this handful of tongues. Super gross. But this was a 3.5 Lawbreaker Suspense Stories number 11. Very nice presenting copy. Just has this bit of mouse chew on the top. And I got a 3.0 with a book from CGC that had even more mouse chew along the bottom of the spine than what's here. So I think 3.5 easily could get that from CGC. Might even get like a 4. And so this one went for 1,320. I had this going for 2,400. This was CGC. This was 45% below my estimate. I can almost guarantee you this book is getting cross-graded. I mean, the peak sale for this one was $2,880. I mean, this is a very in-demand Golden Age book. I mean, I can almost guarantee you this book is getting cross-graded and sold. All right. Now, this is just it's like a pretty rare book. Speed Comics number 31, World War II cover. You've got Hitler on the cover. I believe that's Hirohito. Let's see here. Hirohito on the cover, the World War II cover. Those are always in demand. So 1.8 went for $1,020. I had this going for $1,500, went 32% below my estimate. So we're just kind of continuing this trend of underperforming books. All right, now the next one. This is the second biggest CBCS book that was in this auction, right behind the Amazing Fantasy 15. I definitely would have bid on this one if it would have went lower, but we'll talk about this one a little bit too. I love this book. I have a 4.5 CGC. That's why I'm very familiar with this book. I valued this book at $16,000 with CGC, and I could actually see it going as high as maybe $17,000. Went for $13,200. This is a solid looking copy. You might go, well, why is it a 4.5? If you go and check the grader's notes, it's actually detached on the back cover at both staples. So definitely a risky book, one that you might, you cross grade. And if somebody, so here's those staples. You can see it's a little hairy on the back. You can see it's a little bit of rust. So it's like probably only holding on by a little bit. It's cut at that staple there. It's hard to see here, but I checked the grader's notes. And so this is one where if something happens and that detaches, like I said earlier, the max grade with CGC you're getting is a 4. So you're immediately down to a 4. And are you going to actually get that 4? Might you get a 3.5 because there's maybe some other flaws, that kind of thing. I don't think that this was a bad pickup at all. I think that this was still a solid pickup, even if it was going to get a 4 or a 3.5. It's just that this was not a good price for a 4.5. And that's what we're talking about here. It's how is the book performing compared to what a CGC book would get. And so it's 18% below my estimate, even for a major book like this. And it's a good looking copy. I mean, it really is. It is a good looking copy of this book. It just has those, and those are the types of flaws you want to look for if you want a really solid presenting copy that doesn't cost quite as much. It's still going to be very expensive here. But again, underperformer. Now, the last book that we're going to talk about here, there were a couple others, but we've been talking for a while here. The last book that we're going to talk about here was a Tales from the Crypt number 22, and that's because this was the worst performer in this auction for CBCS. Now, yes, it has these, I don't know if that would have been tape or if there's something else that was up there that kind of discolored the top. The rest of the book looks really nice. And I did actually discount the value on this book, assuming that people might not bid as much because of that kind of like the detracting flaws on the top. So it went for $384 for a 3.5. I had this book at $750. This price is crazy low for this book. And that's 49% below my estimate. And so if you have been, keeping track here, every single book went below my estimate. There was only one CBCS book that beat my estimate, and it was this one. This Magazine is Haunted, a 2.0 went for $204. I had it going for $200. Beat my estimate by 2%. That's it. Of the Golden Age books that I was watching, this was the only one that beat my estimate. And I feel like this was a fair comparison to make. Look, pricing all the CGC books that were Golden Age, comparing them to all the CBCS books that were Golden Age, because the CBCS ones, this is where, again, I had more keys, more important books that I could price. And out of those 9 books, it averaged 27% below my estimate. So if you are a CBCS fan, keep an eye out for these. If you legitimately think that these books should sell for just as much, and I agree, you should be buying the book, not the case. But the reality is the demand for the CGC cased books is higher. It's no different than PSA versus Beckett versus CGC for cards. PSA cards command a premium. CGC books command a premium. But if you think it should be otherwise, come out and bid on them. So that every time somebody is looking at these books when they're selling, you're not seeing these big underperformers with these. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, all that kind of stuff. Again, I am not trying to rag on CBCS, but I think that it is more important to talk about this than to just pretend like it's going to resolve itself on its own, because it's not. It's just going to keep doing this indefinitely unless people are actively out there looking for these books and bidding on these books. But if you'd like to see more videos like this, I got more videos over here. Got the subscription button right here, and I will see you in the next video.